not really supposed to talk about this, but everybody talks about the Kalergi plan. Quigley says the Kalergi plan was adopted by the Royal Society, which is to replace the existing people groups with other large people groups, create a big blob where there's no actual in-group, out-group preferences, make everybody into a big blob, and they're much easier to control. He absolutely does say this. And I bought the book, Practical Idealism by Count Kalergi. Quigley says that was adopted by the Royal Society plan to essentially destroy the existing Europe and turn it into a giant socialist blob. Now, what's the best way to do that? What's the best way to do that in Europe? Well, what foreign people group would love to come in and take over and destroy Islam? So the importation of Muslims in mass to Europe and to the UK, which the Fabian socialists literally said they wanted to do and would do by design.
God.
They admitted that. And guess what? Same thing in the US, except the Muslim stuff's a little slower because it takes a while to get Muslims into America. But obviously the open border is part of that in America. But yeah, I mean, if you read Kalergi himself, because people say, oh, you're not supposed to talk about that. It's an evil conspiracy theory. I've got his freaking book right here. He says it. He says, yes, destroy and dilute the existing people, turn it into a giant blob, then it will fit into a world government.
I mean, look at Canada. Canada's full of it too.
Yeah.
Great point.
I mean, it's just crazy to me that once again, as it always is, we just have the theory of something is worse than real world consequences, right? It's just like the theory of hate, which is, it's so crazy because someone just tweeted me about that plan, the Kalergi plan.
Oh, yeah.
Just tweeted me about it. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, how can we sit there and say this is anti-Semitic when we see it happening in real life? And the theory of what could come by discussing this versus what's actually happening on a street level is like unbelievable to me. That's like my argument with a good friend of mine about 9/11. It's just like, oh, dude, this is anti-Semitic. But I'm like, but 4.5 million people died because we bought a lie about what happened that day. How is the theory? If you play out the tape, what do you think's going to happen if we discuss all the different intelligence agencies involved? And it's so crazy you bring it up. So everyone's like, Saudi Arabia is involved with it. That's basically British intelligence from what you're telling me. So here we got Mossad, we got British intelligence through Saudi Arabia. We have the CIA. And like, if we have this discussion, according to them, we're going to have there's going to be trains and goose stepping. When in reality, 4.5 million people that had nothing to do with this attack all died.
Right.
It's so crazy to me.
Well, yeah, and why is that anti-Semitic Arab people also derive genetically from Shem. They're Semitic peoples.
Oh, dude.
So it's just a deflection to call everything anti-Semitic and hate and all that. Yeah. By the way, the fact that somebody again, if Kalergi himself writes about this plan, and Quigley, who has no interest in genetics and racial theories or whatever, Quigley says that they adopted the Kalergi plan. I mean, that's what tells you what the Fabian socialist elite of Europe and in the UK adopted as their model. And so it has nothing to do ultimately with, genetics of people in the Middle East. It has to do with imperial control. I'm not saying that they don't utilize genetics in tribal warfare, but at the imperial control level, like you said, Sam, like David Rockefeller, Lord Rothschild, they don't care about people's. They're not, I believe Islam. I believe they're above that. They're using it as a tool.
So, okay. Honestly, Jay, that was one of the best conversations we've ever had on this show. That was like so insanely informative. It's amazing to me. So I want to kind of get into some weird stuff right now here with you.
Dude, I don't know if you've seen my talks on this, but
sex what? Sex espionage? Yeah, dude.
That's right up your alley. Let's get dirty here.
I mean, dude, it is so crazy to me how sex is just this tool of control. It's crazy to me. And, I know that, again, you're Orthodox. I am learning Christianity right now. Johnny is Christian. We don't know what what are you? Are you just here for?
No, I grew up Catholic, baptized and everything.
Okay. you know, and our like our society's view on sex, where it's like there's no normalcy. It's completely, you know, shoved into the corner, or it's like it's got to be everywhere in insanity. There's no middle ground there. And I think if we got to a place in the middle ground, there'd be a lot less blackmailing going on. I feel like
Right.
so much of like the taboo of sex is used to control people. You know, regardless of what your sexuality is and all that, that's not the discussion right now. But like the make things taboo,
Yeah.
is a means for control. And here we go. We see it happening over and over. These intelligence agencies using sex, using people who will like it a little bit weird, using them to manipulate the masses.
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've been keeping up with the Diddy stuff. I mean, this is really just a total vindication of everything that we theorized in terms of, like, you know, Hollywood mind control, eyes wide shut parties. Like, it's all like totally out there in the open. Basically, you've got you know, Diddy running you know, a blackmail version of a blackmail, right? Blackmail with a blackmail.
Blackmail.
Basically Blackstein, right? He's basically Jeffrey Blackstein. So I mean, it's Epstein, but for the rap sphere. And it's not just Diddy. We know it's Clive Davis. It goes up higher than that. That's really where he was probably learning all of that. Just like Epstein was learning this from Robert Maxwell, the famous, you know, Cold War spy and sex compromiser, who's Ghislaine's dad. So these are, again, like techniques that are sort of passed on from these higher, older level people. I mean, I haven't kept up with like what you've said about Diddy, but like, you know about Clive Davis and all that, right? The music industry.
Yeah, and there's someone even higher, right? There's like one guy that's even higher.
Be,
that is like he basically controls 70% of the like top 100 songs on whatever list. Like, I forget what his name is, but they've all been named in this into control. And it's just crazy to me because, you know, we have the discussion. What is okay? So a lot of people think the Hawk Tui girl is controlled ops. They think she's a controlled plant, and it's meant to move her in certain positions. I always go, well, we won't know until we see her start saying some ridiculous shit to manipulate people. I agree, how she's the number 3 podcast, you know, in the world, which is, you know, which kind of isn't actually what it means. That means that a bunch of people are signing up for a podcast, subscribing. It doesn't actually mean that they're listening, right, Johnny? It's kind of
it's based on reviews. It's a formula based on reviews and new subscriptions. The iTunes rankings, at least. I assume the other like Spotify and the other services.
Which is a bunch of people running to subscribe for, it is what it is.
I mean, I can't imagine. It's interminable. Have you tried to listen to any of it? I can't imagine listening to it for more.
I can't imagine it being listenable at all.
No.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, how long is that going to last? How long is that going to last, right? But they think that she's a plant. And you go, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of blackmail? What is the purpose of controlling these stars? What is your thoughts on why? I can understand politicians, right? And it's why I think that, you know, that you're probably never going to see the Jeffrey Epstein list, and or see anyone brought to justice for that. Right. But I think you're more likely to see the P. Diddy people brought to justice. But what are your thoughts on why they want to control entertainers?
I think one easy way to understand, and one parallel, is organized crime and mafia. If you look at the way organized crime and mafia works, like I just did another interview with Sammy the Bull the other day, and we kind of went into some of this. Like, I was asking him, so as a know, famous hitman mob dude, like, what is your view of the city and the world and society? And, you know, he went into a lot of depth about chess games and control, manipulation, psychological tricks, and so forth from the criminal perspective, which was very insightful. And I think if you take him as kind of a microcosm explaining that lifestyle in that world, you know, expand that up to people like what we're talking about, these higher level corporate elite people, it's the same mindset. It's like, look, any of these areas or domains is going to be susceptible to high level criminal operations and control. And one of the reasons why the sexuality side of it is so tempting is that, think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He was working with, as part of MK Ultra when he drew up that list of needs, and he was drawing that up so that the CIA could say, what are the basic motivators for human beings to control them? Now, originally that was drawn up in a way to try to figure out psychological profiles of world leaders. So the original thing was the CIA was saying, hey, we need some way to like classify the basic motivations for any human being, and then we'll particularize it based on what is Putin really like, right? What does whoever president, Mumbai, what is he, what's his proclivities? And so if you think about the hierarchy of needs, like sex is pretty high up there after food, right? So you're not really going to compromise people on, how many, Totino's pizza rolls they're eating, but you could compromise them on, if they like butt stuff, right? So especially decades before it was normalized to like butt stuff, or if you like underage children, that's right. That's easy. So I think this is always, because prostitution is the world's second oldest profession.
It's the oldest.
I'm sorry, prostitution is the oldest. Spying is the second oldest. These two go together, right? And so it's just always been very beneficial to power elite to get dirt, to get information. It just naturally kind of folds over into any domain where criminals can rise to power. If it's the music industry, if it's Hollywood, if it's government, you're going to have people trying to get dirt. Blackmail is just natural.
It's so crazy to me, right? And it's just like it's been done over and over and over and over and over again.
Here's something I don't understand. It's like, so the public is just now learning about this stuff, which obviously has been going on for a long time at the government and elite level. So did people, like, if you're an elected senator, right? Like, was nobody briefing anyone on the possibility of this? Nobody was telling, you know what I mean? Like famous basketball players, like, hey, you might get invited to the butt party. Just watch out. Like, you know what I mean? Like nobody told anybody.
No, it's like, dude, I completely and utterly agree, man. It is absolutely insanity to me. It's absolutely insanity to me. It's like, and I think the whole thing is like, if you go to these parties, you really got to watch yourself, because you'll get drugged and then you'll wake up and there'll be a naked little girl in your thing, and then they compromise you, which is why if you kind of look at there's no term limits in Washington. Once you have somebody blackmailed, you keep them there forever. It's crazy to me, and it's just like when we get into like, I think Jennifer Lopez is knee deep in this P. Diddy shit. And you get, because all this stuff's starting to come out about how she's not really a good singer. This thing just came out about how like people would sell her songs and then they send her tracks on how it's supposed to sound, and you're not supposed to use the tracks. And Jennifer Lopez is just using all the tracks, and she's just sing, which is classic P. Diddy, right? Just take someone else's song and just put a you know, around it, and suddenly it is your song, right? And so it's starting to come out, but like they're like well-known people are in these videos, dude. And it's like, how crazy did it get? Like, to me, it's like fame. Like I always wanted to be a working comedian, but I never thought I would do insane shit to get there. And it's just like the level of psychopath that comes to get at the highest levels of certain entertainment, like being a touring band, like pop singer. It's so competitive. Why you over these other people? Well, what are you willing to do?
What are you willing to do? Yeah, exactly.
But okay, you said, I think some people actually wanted to go. They literally knew that they wanted to go, and I wanted to go to the after party. I don't even want to stay at the normal party. Have you seen the Netflix thing called Baby Reindeer?
No.
It's crazy. This guy actually knows it's going to happen to him, and he keeps going to this director's house knowing that he's going to get molested, hoping that one day
he does.
He Yeah, hoping that one day he comes through with the promise, and the guy never comes through with the promise. This guy gets molested for like I don't know how long per se, but
Bro,
people don't
that
care.
is insane because I'm not getting the specifics, but basically all of these Weinstein chicks were like that. They're like, I just thought this is what you did to make it in Hollywood, and then nothing happened to them, and they all were just like bitching, like, yeah, I blew him and his friends, and nothing happened. You're like, sounds like horrible blowjobs.
Well, here's a funny thing. So I was on with, quite frankly, I think last year, and we did a whole review of the Godfather novel, right? The original Mario Puzo novel. So we read that. We did a whole series of podcasts going through the novel. Dude, I didn't realize that all the stuff we're talking about, it's in the Godfather novel. So if you remember when they go to the producer in Hollywood who's going to make that movie, and then the nephew of Don Corleone, right? He's actually supposed to be Frank Sinatra. The character is based on Frank Sinatra. He wants to be in this movie role,
Yes.
and the director doesn't want to give it to him. So the Godfather, as you know, ends up sending the cutting the horse's head off, putting in this famous scene where the horse is in the bed and all that, which convinces the director to put the Frank Sinatra guy in the movie. In the novel, like when Don Corleone's lawyer goes and talks to the Hollywood dude, there's a sequence where it's like it's identified that this is a pedo thing going on. Like when the lawyer gets there, there's a young girl, way underage, who leaves the producer's house office after being molested. So in other words, he's telling you that Hollywood's pedo. Everybody knows it's a casting couch. In fact, in the novel, it also talks about the other Hollywood people that had to sleep with whoever to get. Who doesn't know about the casting couch, right? But in the novel, it also has the pedo stuff. And if you remember in Godfather 2, the movie, not the novel, the movie, because the novel ends at like, it doesn't go that far. But in Godfather 2, the movie, do you remember that the Corleones want to expand to Vegas? And in Vegas, there's this senator who doesn't want to give them the right to set up the casinos. He's blocking the legal ability for them to set up a casino. What do? They wait until he goes to one of the Corleone whorehouses. They drug the senator. He wakes up in the bed with a dead prostitute.
Oh my God.
And then he's forever in the pocket of the Corleone. So that's just the organized crime angle of it in movies, telling you how it really works. Because Mario Puzo based all that on like real shit. And I asked Sammy the Bull about all that. It's like, yeah, it's all real.
It's so, I mean, dude, it's deep, man, because, again, like when I talk about like the war between Trump and the establishment, I don't think there's really good guys in that fight. I just think it's two crime organizations fighting over control of the purse on who gives out who gets the deals, who gets the contracts. And if you sit in that seat, you give out the contracts. And I think Trump he actually wants to be president versus Kamala Harris, who's just like happy with being there. Like she really just wants a Kardashian in it. You're president, but you're not going to really do anything. You're just going to run around and give speeches and make money and take pictures and get free shit.
I mean, she seems like nobody's even home. Like,
yeah,
her and that Tim Walz dude just seem like total, just like somebody called them Muppets or something. Like they're like Muppets. Like there's nobody there, like a puppet, but it's like a total Muppet. Yeah.
But like this is the Roman Empire. They put a mannequin in, and outside influences run everything. Which is basically who's bigger. Blinken. Blinken got named like one of the most powerful Jews in the world by like Israel magazine. Like,
is that a thing they do? They rank the Jews? That's great. Right.
Yeah, he's like a top. I think he was like a top 10 Jew.
2024.
Top 10 Jews.
Dude, you want to? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
No, there's a great. Everybody missed this series. Okay, so John le Carre, who's the famous British intelligence. Former British intelligence, who wrote a bunch of famous fiction stories, right? He wrote the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy story, which is loosely based on the Cambridge spy ring. He wrote that novel, which became the Gary Oldman movie, the famous movie. So he wrote this series, which came out like 2018. I didn't see anybody talking about it. totally forgotten, but it's got Michael Shannon. It's got Florence Pugh, the blonde chick from that pagan human sacrifice movie. I forget what it's called. Midsommar.
Oh,
So there was this series that Hulu or Paramount Plus, I forget who, they did this series. Everybody should watch. It's pretty crazy, but it's about Mossad operations. And it's like, dude, this shit is crazy, right? So Le Carre wrote the story, and he's, as a British intelligence guy, criticizing the sort of Mossad operation, but he thought it was a good story. It's all set in relationship to PLO, Israel, Lebanon. It's set in the late 70s, early 80s, probably a combination of like a bunch of real sort of Mossad versus Hezbollah, Lebanon, PLO type stories all in one story. But that's an awesome series. Like, just from a insight window into what really goes on type of perspective.
Little Drummer Girl.
I should watch that. Let me pull up the name of it. But
Little Drummer Girl, right?
That's it. Little Drummer Girl. Exactly. Everybody should watch that. That's crazy. Very insightful though.
It's so nuts to me, dude. And like, here we are. I'm gladly will say I'm a Pizzagate guy. Said since the start. We'll still sit here and go 100% true. A lot of people get taboo with, oh no, that's it. I mean, dude. I mean, you got P. Diddy right now getting sued for drugging 9-year-olds.
Oh wow!
And you're telling me that they couldn't do stuff in a basement with kids? I mean, like, because they're serving pizza? Is that what you're telling me?
Dude, remember that governor who was like, Alex always plays this clip, that he's like the Virginia governor. He's like, we keep the new babies, we put them on life support. We keep them really comfortable, and then we put them to death, and then we sell and harvest the organs. Do you know what I'm talking about? This?
No, what?
No, yeah. No, remember when Alex was and Eddie were arguing their fake argument on Rogan? Remember that? And then Eddie came and put Alex in a headlock, and they were pretending like they were fighting. This was the clip that Alex was talking about when he's like, pull it up. There's Governor of Virginia saying we keep the babies alive, we harvest organs, sell it. And then Eddie was joking, but he was like, no, dude, that don't exist. And they were having that fake fun fight. This is the clip that they were talking about, if I remember. It's like the governor of Virginia is talking about. So what I'm saying is, like, dude, if they'll put babies on ice and then harvest the organs of babies, what, you think they won't do all this other crazy shit? What are you talking about?
And nobody wants to talk about, because it's so dark. They can't even get into it.
Yeah.
We just had a guy come on talking about what they're doing in Flint. It's so dark what they're doing in Flint, Michigan. And when you have that Professor Dyson yelling about, oh, you said Kamel's name wrong. That is racism, and it just goes on this word salad that you just know he uses to pull white pussy. He just guilts white chicks and giving up pussy by calling them racist in a way they don't even know what he's talking about.
Have you tried that game? Have you spit some of that game, Sam?
You don't understand. You're the fact that you are not fornicating with me.
Sam goes into Starbucks. He's like, dude, you're all racist. You should identify as some minority and then like act like the baristas being
I've got that clip here if you just want to.
Yeah, let's watch it
briefly. I think I've cued it to the right point. Just a second. Let me get the sound shared.
Yeah, Alex plays this clip all the time. I can't remember which governor it is.
Is it right? Northam?
I think it's Northam. That's him. Yeah.
Tell me if you...
The infant would be kept comfortable. The infant would be resuscitated if that's what the mother and the family desired, and then a discussion would ensue between the physicians and the mother. So I think this was really blown out of proportion. But again, we want the government not to be involved in these types of decisions. We want the decision to be made by the mothers and their providers, and this is why, Julie, that legislators, most of whom are men, by the way, shouldn't be telling a woman what she should.
This is
be doing
the clip of him explaining
the
viral clip. This is him trying to explain away what he had said earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
so this is like the whitewash.
I'm sure they wiped it off the internet.
No.
Yeah, you probably have to find
As
that
you know,
on
the issue of
Twitter.
abortion rights emerges every year in the General Assembly session. This year, no exception. There was a very contentious committee hearing yesterday when Fairfax County Delegate Kathy Tran made in place, even as a woman.
What's so crazy to me,
I'll see if I can,
is how they whether it's just through like MK Ultra on a mass scale, or it's the chemicals that they're putting in our food that we're eating that's shish kebabbing our brains, but the way they can manipulate us into just getting behind certain movements, it like the way they've convinced progressive white women or progressive women at all that the single issue is abortion, that nothing around that, nothing else matters, no matter how expensive the gas gets, no matter how expensive the groceries get, no matter how bad the crime gets, no matter how bad the city gets, no matter, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is whether they can have an abortion or not, and they'll allow everything else to burn to save that one thing. It's incredible to me.
I'd have to get at least one a year for me to care enough.
You would have to have at least one
if I was a
abortion
female,
a year.
I'm like, why do you, unless you're getting them, like, why do you really like, unless you already have kids, I'm like, why do you even promote it till it's crazy? Oh, I think that's crazy.
I think it's just nuts to me.
It is crazy. This is like, it reminds me of what Tim Leary was saying, like when he was saying, I couldn't get people to take LSD back when I first was trying to dole it out. He said, so what I figured out was if I couch this as a right, that you're being oppressed into not exercising, he said, then everybody wanted to become LSD activists. They wanted to experiment with it because they felt, oh, the government's trying to keep me from it. So for whatever reason, I think probably Tavistock or, SRI, or they figured out that when you couch things as a right, people feel like they're way more energized for whatever reason to act on it.
It's like weed. They legalize weed and kids aren't smoking it as much anymore.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, dude. It's like that how they can manipulate us into caring about certain things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's just crazy to me. So I don't want to keep you here forever, but there's just two more things I want to talk about with you. Who is Jacques Alenius? I butchered that name. What the books? I saw one of your things. Globally operative. Jack. What is her name? That person's.
What did I put? I'm trying to remember what I wrote in the email. Let me see.
Something globally operative.
Jacques Attali.
Yeah. Okay. Close enough.
Oh yeah. Jacques Attali. Yeah. So basically, I covered his books recently. He's really important because he's like he's called the Kissinger of France. So basically, what Kissinger was to America, Attali was to multiple French presidents, like as the background sort of handler. And France is not like the most important country in the world, but they're overlooked for some of the things that they're involved in when it comes to the New World Order. There's a lot of kind of weird deep state type stuff with France and weapons technology that people don't know. France has a lot of companies and groups that are involved in that. That's nobody ever talks about that. That's really under the radar. But of course, France has played a key role in, historically at least, being at the front of the march towards technocracy and the global world order. They've had some of the top technocrats come from France, Auguste Comte, people like that. Some of the top, most famous Marxists are from out of France. French Revolution is a bunch of those characters. And we just saw the Olympics in France. Actually, the ceremonies were all symbolic portrayals of this Luciferian sort of satanic Marxist socialist victory. That's the meaning of all of those ceremonies. I did a bunch of breakdowns with a bunch of different podcasts on that. I don't know if you guys probably saw that, right? Everybody was talking about that at the Olympics.
Mithras, right? Mithras.
All that worship. Shit. Oh, it's crazy. Yeah.
And now is Mithras from Zoroastrianism?
No, the Mithra cult was like a Roman Empire, unique to the Roman Empire, where they kind of brought in this like baptism of blood, and it was a mystical cult where you could like
and involves trans
Eleusinian mysteries. Yes, exactly. There's a really good. We did a whole lecture through this Cambridge Companion to Western Mysticism and Esotericism.
Dude, I love when you grab books. Dude, it's
the first chapter is about Mithras and the Eleusinians, and that shit's wild. What all they were into back then. They were doing MK Ultra stuff back then, dude. It's crazy.
Sorry interrupting. You brought up France. What do you think about Bridget Macron?
Oh, that, yeah. Like, remember, Macron was in like Rothschild circles, and then
She is a Rothschild, they think.
Yeah. I think so, there's some connection like that, but so they'll choose these people like Macron, and then Jacques Attali's probably still consulting all those. He's probably still consulting. So anyway, the reason he matters is that he's one of these European technocratic elite. He's got a lot of famous quotes going around about stabbies that he said a long time ago, and that they would be mandated. People dispute whether the stabbies comment is real. It's hard to know because it supposedly comes from an old French interview, which who knows if it's real or not. But anyway, in his books, he basically says all the same shit. So it's like, okay, so maybe that interview is not real, maybe it is, but like he says all the same stuff in his books. In 1991, he wrote a book called The Millennium, Losers and Winners in the New World Order. And basically he says now that the wall has fallen, Berlin Wall, there's no power dialectic between East and West anymore. He says, now we can enter into the next phase of the New World Order. And he says, he was put at the head of the ECB, European Common Bank, to restructure and bring all of the Soviet bloc countries into the neoliberal world order, make them all IMF debt slaves. That doesn't make the Soviet Union good. It just means that you go from you're under Beelzebub, now you're under Lucifer, right? So they're just changing demons that you're under. And then he's like in charge of restructuring the former Soviet countries into EU, putting them into debt slavery. And he says in the book, get ready for mass open border immigration throughout Europe and the West. You will all be reorganized into a giant new world order, basically, in 1991 as the Kissinger of France. So he's just another one of these global elite goons. He wrote a different book that I lectured through a couple times over the years. It's called Brief History of the Future. He wrote that in 2006, 15 years after the 1991 book. And in that book, he just says like where we are now. Like everything he was saying in 1991 basically was what was started happening in the 2000s. In the 2006 book, Brief History of the Future, is basically where we are now. I mean, he's got a whole chapter on transhumanism. It's like you're going to go into there's going to be a hive mind. There's going to be a giant global golem. You're going to be hooked into it. It's everything.
So crazy, dude.
It shows that they planned this from that level for a long time.
And do you think it's all Luciferian, Baal worship, Moloch worship?
Well,
do you think
for
that's
him? So in the book, he uses Masonic symbolism. He says that the Cold War was like two pillars that balance out the world order. He says once the Soviet Union fell, he says that's one pillar falling. And he says that it's two pillars in a pyramid, and the pyramid is the world structure. But they have a controlled, the way he describes it like a dialectic. He's using intentional Masonic symbolism in the book. And at the end of the book, he says, in the 1991 book, he says, we got to have a new covenant, a new Mount Sinai, a new world religion. He says all that kind of gibberish, like they always say. And in the 2006 book, it's like straight up Golem. That's his term, like Golem, Kabbalah Golem. So yeah, Luciferian, sure.
So I get into this, like, like we've had a lot of people come on talking about Trump as Kabbalist, mystic. What are your thoughts on that? Like, like this, we just had a show about breaking down Hermeticism, and I didn't know that Hermes was the child of Nimrod and all that stuff. What is your thoughts on all that?
So there was an old 1990s book that Trump in the first chapter, I forget the name of the book, but in the first chapter, he says something like, oh, I have a friend who's like a Kabbalah rabbi, and I would like to thank him for something. I don't get the impression that Trump really understands or is really deep into that stuff. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't have a problem criticizing Trump. I think he's definitely just pragmatically better than Kabbalah Harris. I'll call her Kabbalah.
I'm with
Harris.
you on,
How about Kabbalah Harris? Nobody said that one yet.
Does Robbie strike you as anything? I mean, religious or spiritual? He doesn't strike me as much.
I mean, he kind of seems to like, evangelicals are great. Oh, the Episcopalians are great. I love Catholics. Look at St. Michael. He's wonderful. Probably the best of all the angels, really. Yeah. I mean, it's like he's probably whatever's
expedient, right? Like a pragmatist, like you said.
Yeah. I mean, he could. maybe he's sincere about it. I don't know, but I don't get the impression that like he's super schooled in Kabbalah to like know, he doesn't come off as somebody who really cares that much about that stuff.
It's interesting for sure, man. I think the world's ran by sorcerers and they're all just playing this sorcery game. But like hermeticism and all that stuff, it's like very weird because you study it and you go like, if you think about some long enough, you can make it happen, which is manifestation. Is that dark? Is that evil? And like, if you had to go in who runs the world, who do you think runs the world at the highest levels?
So I think there are demonic entities. I think that they do, in a limited sense, run the world. I think that ultimately God's in control. I'm not like a Gnostic. I don't think this world's a simulation or some evil prison or something like that. I think there is a real historical battle between good and evil. I think that underneath the spiritual entities that Paul talks about, the principalities, powers, and dominions, there are human beings who fall into a kind of a control structure, but they don't all have to know self-consciously that they're part of that. You could be a militant atheist and you're still kind of under the control, ultimately, I would say, of Satan. Even if you're an atheist, you don't believe in demons. So maybe at the highest level, some of those people, I think, probably do self-consciously think, no, I'm serving Lucifer. I mean, you would get some of the British elite seem to speak that way. I mean, these people that are like really into hurting children. If you look into like Elm Guesthouse, British MP Cyril Smith, Ed Heath, do you remember those stories of like those really wicked British MPs that were part of, you know what I'm talking about? If you look into King Cora scandal and the Elm Guesthouse and all the Savile type stuff.
Nabble.
With Jimmy
Nabble, right?
Huh?
With Jimmy
Savile. Nabble?
Say what?
Nabble? Have you heard of Nabble?
Jimmy Savile. Jimmy Savile.
I'm talking about Jimmy Savile,
Savile.
Cyril Smith, Ed Heath. These are famous British MPs that were like doing awful things to kids.
What was the island they were on? It was like Isle of Wight or something, wasn't it?
Isle of Wight. King Cora they're also connected to the King Cora scandal. Exactly. That's the British stuff.
It's the dark. I mean, that's as dark as it gets.
I think those people probably were like, no, we actually legit serve Satan, and I'm gonna do like the most evil stuff possible.
You study that pig farmer in Canada.
Oh, yeah, I have.
And how he was almost getting out, and someone said, "Fuck that," and they just went and stabbed him to death, so he couldn't leave the prison. Like, it's crazy.
Are you talking about the Picton pig farm?
Yeah, and how like Trudeau was like lived like a couple blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
And he was about to get out. He's up for parole, and somebody just said, "Nope, that's not happening." And they stabbed him to death in prison.
Yeah, I did a deep dive. So that like redneck retard dude was like recruiting people, bringing them to that place where there was all these big elites coming to do, and they had like rooms with like cameras for doing all kinds of shit. You know what I mean? They ground up people and made them into like gummy bears and shit. Isn't that right?
Dude, I don't know, dude. It's so dark and sad.
So the bodies, that dude that went to prison that you're talking about, that weird kind of inbred looking redneck Canadian dude that took the heat, they were grinding up people and making like gummy bears. It's just, that one's crazy, dude.
Hurt people. So something we talked about last night on Broken Sim that just dropped. First, the Old Testament, New Testament. What do you think happens from the Old Testament to the New Testament? Like, how come Johnny, what is your theory on it?
Well, I mean, it's always felt to me, and this is purely kind of feeling my way through it,
Speculative.
It's that the Old Testament is for a different kind of human, and the new covenant, the new deal between Jesus and humanity, God and humanity, is more for modern man. That's why so many of the things in the Old Testament seem savage that we hear about, the stories. It's because, that was a different type of man in those days, a different standard for a different type of man. So
the Orthodox view is similar to that. We think that God met those people at that time, kind of where they were, and introduced kind of rules and laws that were appropriate for what was expected to that people group. So in other words, it's kind of like
with them. He met them halfway.
Yeah, it's kind of like they were in a childlike state. And so certain things were tolerated, which weren't intended to always be tolerated. And so in our view, everything happening in the Old Testament, everything like all the temple, the sacrifices, all that, those are symbols and types of what Jesus himself came to fulfill and to do. So like the Passover, that's fulfilled in Christ being the Passover, or the Day of Atonement with the high priest going into the temple and sprinkling the blood. That's all, according to the book of Hebrews, fulfilled in what Jesus was doing in his ministry and his ascension. So for us, all of those things are good and true, and they're pedagogical. There's a lot of lessons there, but they all were just really kind of coming to a focal point in what the person in the ministry of Christ did within history. And so that's us fulfilled. It's still useful. It's still, prophetic in the sense of like telling us about how Christ was a Messiah. Like if there's all these messianic predictions in the Old Testament, but it had a limited pedagogical function according